Grab your own slice of financial independence this week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. Our guest this week started her financial independence journey with a divorce. She had two little kids, and get this, $257,000 in debt. And this was all happening during the 2008 financial crisis. Yikes. Most people would have just like totally folded, right? But she made a decision. And 10 years later, she hit a millionaire status. Yeah. So Monica Scudieri is a personal finance coach, the author of Grab Your Slice of Financial Independence. She works with divorced and single parents, young professionals, and anyone that's rebuilding after a financial setback. She offers real, judgment-free help, and I'm excited to welcome Monica to the show. Monica, how you doing?
I am doing great. That was a great introduction. Gosh, I need to carry you everywhere with me.
Right on, right on. Well, no, it really is impressive, and I want to just hit this straight to the gut. So like I understand. I mean, that kind of was the catalyst for my journey was going through divorce. But you, as a single mom, and having this huge, I mean, $250,000 in debt. Let's talk a little bit. Well, and going through this during 2008, I can't. What was going through your mind when you said, "I'm going to make this decision to reach financial independence"? Like I'm going to change the way that I'm going to think about this.
So I will say that truly necessity is the mother of all invention. Because now here I am. My parents came to this country. They were not college educated. They did not speak the language. They didn't have two pennies to rub together, and they were never in a position where I was with all that debt. College educated, speak the language, had jobs. But 2008 was a bit of a special period of time, and I was unemployed on top of when the divorce was truly finalized.
Mhm.
I lost my job on top of that, and was unemployed for the first 9 months of that journey, and then unemployment two more times. But even with all the setbacks, I would use the time where I was unemployed. There weren't a lot of jobs to apply for, but whatever there was, you applied. But I would spend that time, and it was just very strategic. I have two kids. I need to have a roof over our head, clothes on the back, and food on the table. And so when I was employed, I would make sure to invest even a little bit in my 401k, even if I didn't get a match, because I'm building those muscles. I would make sure to put money in my emergency fund because I could lose this job because they were all temp jobs. And so just very, very aware of every red cent. If we did go out to eat, it was get a meal and then, the kids eat free kind of thing,
Mhm.
wherever we could stretch.
I love
But
those. I love those deals.
oh my God, yeah.
Oh,
And then
all the
as
time.
my son got older and his appetite started to grow,
Right.
I took the kid meal and he
Yeah.
got the adult meal.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, so Monica, can we back up a little bit because you meant, I mean, these are some good financial habits and you being aware.
Yeah,
So like go back to when like your parents came here. I mean, I don't think your mom even spoke English, right?
right. She did not.
So where did you learn this financial literacy, like to know to invest in your 401k and build that emergency fund? Like let's go back a little bit further. And how did you learn kind of those basics?
I started doing a lot of reading and blog posts. I came across Budgets Are Sexy. Uh,
Mm,
and
J
that
Money.
was, yeah, Jay Money. Yeah, great guy. And I think it was just such I mean, I love, he publishes, I don't know if he still does it, but he was publishing his net worth at the end of each month.
Mhm.
And I loved how he told the story that, well, this went down X number of dollars because this happened. And it was all so relatable.
Mhm.
You get married, you have a baby, you have another baby, you lose your job. Like all of these things that where life just happens, and that's everybody. And and it just gave me like that it's possible. This, you know, he went started with very little, and then look how he grew his net worth. And I started reading about other people that have done the same, and it was inspirational. And I just felt like this could be something. And so that's where I came up with, you know, this big audacious goal of $1 million net worth, even though I had a negative, you know, all the, you know, all that debt. I had the house, but the house is not liquid, so it, you know, it counts, but you can't even sell it because it was 2008, and it took me 5 years to get out from underneath it, to move. But yeah, I just kept focusing on I can do this, and even though I would get these obstacles to push me back, I just felt like, you know, I just kept moving forward, and that I think was a saving grace. That and just a lot of educating myself when I had no job, you
Sure.
know.
Well, that
So
that was the thing. I mean, you mentioned that you were unemployed.
yeah,
And I think that a lot of people listening, like,
times,
right? I mean, that's just
three
crazy. So when you
times.
add it all up, you know, you had this massive pile of debt and you had to care for your kids. And you mentioned kind of that day to day, you know, looking for kids eat free deals and
Yeah,
stuff like that. Um,
yeah,
you know, I guess if someone is listening and they're like, oh man, like what's that first step? What's that first thing to start to get out from under that weighing debt holding you down?
yeah, yeah. The first step was absolutely the hardest. It took me, I would say, probably 4 to 6 months to do it, and that was I had to be super honest with myself,
Oh, okay.
and that is so scary and paralyzing because, you know, I don't want to, I know it's bad. And, you know, so I ended up just saying, okay, I look up, okay, this is what the house is worth now. And I put the house as an asset, right? And then I say, this is what's in my savings account. This is, and I basically just list everything, what I have. And my net worth was so tiny that I actually had a line item that said if I sold all the furniture in the house, I could probably get
Wow.
$3,000. So I added that to my net worth. If I sold the car, I could get maybe 2,000 for it, just to make myself feel a little better,
Yeah.
you know. And then once I actually had, you know, real net worth, I removed those line items so that it was all equal, so that every year I measured it so I could see some of the progress. And
Sure.
that, you know, I mean, the first 3 years there was no progress. It actually went down. But once I was able to turn things around, it's a little dopamine hit to
Oh,
see where I
totally.
started. Yeah. And then where I'm going. And so I started making it a habit to track every year, but in every month, at the end of the month, I tracked what was in my in cash accounts. So I could see that go well up or down or whatever. But you know, so those types of things, I think, you know, that, and I'm a big goal setter. And so when I'm having a day where I'm like, geez, what am I doing with my life? Which there were a lot of those, and I'm like not progressing. But then I look at my list and I have, I do this thing, you know, like people check off stuff as they do it. I put little smiley faces because things were just so heavy that I'm like, I'm going to put a little smiley face to the stuff that I did get done,
Right on.
you know, and like those little things really added up to keep me moving forward because there were some heavy periods in there. I mean, like the 3 times unemployed, that totaled almost 2 full years
Wow.
of unemployment. And that was the first 5 years. You know, I mean, you know, back then you had to go into the office. That's what people were doing. And so I couldn't drive very far because I had to drop off and pick up the kids. I couldn't do second or third shift jobs. I couldn't do jobs that required travel or overtime. None of that would work for me because I had the kids. And so, you know, even looking at little side hustles, I'd have to do them when the kids would go see their dad, which was twice a month on the
Hmm.
weekend. So it's not a lot of
Sure.
time there. Not that I would trade it. Absolutely loved having the kids at home, but financially it did make things difficult.
Man, that is so challenging. And it's really hard to keep that momentum when, you know, you're seeing very little progress in the beginning. I mean, that's kind of how it always works, right? Even when you're paying down debt or you're, you know, you're building your own journey, you know, it the beginning years, compounding doesn't really start to show itself until some years down the road. So I totally get it.
True.
You know, Where was there a point that there was a turnaround? Like, what was that like for you when you actually started to see a shift? Like, was there a specific moment that all of a sudden you felt like, oh, the tides are turning, like
Yeah.
this plan is working? What was that like for you?
So it was when there was enough of a break in the real estate market
Mm,
for this area, where I was able to sell the house, pay off the debt, and put a substantial down payment on a smaller house so that my mortgage was small. And once I was able to do that, which that could take up a whole hour to talk about that whole
sure,
scenario, with
sure.
just nightmare situation on the selling and the buying. Um, Once I was able to do that, and then um, that's when things started to turn around.
Okay.
When I was basically at worth nothing, like all the debt was gone, and now I have this house and very little in my bank account, but I'm not, I don't have that pressure of the quarter of a million of debt.
Sure. Oh my gosh, that could be such a relief, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
because the only way I could, and it sounds kind of crazy, but the only way I could figure to make it work was I took all of the debt and I rolled it into one big fat mortgage. So, because it was like different things. So I just rolled it into one and then I made it a fixed payment of the mortgage, which, then the interest on that is tax deductible. So that was one thing I did. I don't know if it was right or wrong, but at least it was a fixed payment
yeah.
and not moving
Well,
around.
again, it's something that's predictable, right?
Yeah.
You can plan for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so around the time that, the world really wasn't, what's the word, like recovered from the 2008, kind of financial crisis, you got into rental properties.
I did.
That's exciting to me. I mean, I like real estate. I invest in real estate as well. So I'm excited to learn more about because I'm curious, getting pre-approved for a rental property as a single mom. Like, how does that contract work? I mean, walk me through a little bit of what got you into real estate in the first place and what that first property was like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually wrote about it in the book. So I'll just give you the short version of it. So I was banking at the same place for many, many years. I knew the branch manager. And so when I decided I was going to get into real estate, I had done all this homework. I talked to these, the realtors, I talked to my CPA and all this different feedback. And I decided, okay, this was going to be something I want to do. The very first thing my realtor said is, you should get pre-approved first, because she wanted to know that if we don't want this to fall through because you don't have approval. So I went to the bank and I talked to the branch manager, and he goes, yeah, I'll connect you with, we'll call him Tom. Tom will handle the pre-approval process. So I had contract job. So that apparently is not considered income according to the bank.
Really?
Yes, but child support is considered income.
Whoa. Okay.
Now, and I asked the question, if their father loses his job and can't pay, I don't understand how that's any different from contract work.
Right.
But they said that that's just the bank rules. That's their barometer. So he told me flat out, he goes, you do not fit our criteria. They're not going to pre-approve you. And I said, I would like to get submitted anyway. And he goes, we'll submit you, but low expectations.
Right.
And I had all of my paperwork. I had to have my taxes, which, doesn't show a lot, but, you submit all the paperwork. I was calling him every couple of weeks. Is it done? Is it done? Because he has to send it up the ladder. Well, it came back and he said, they rejected it. He goes, um, and I said, look, you can talk to your branch manager. I am, very on top of things. I'm a safe bet. And I basically just pitched myself to explain to the bank that I am a safe bet on this loan. And so he went to bat personally to the manager of the loan department
Wow.
for commercial loans. And it took a while to get on her calendar between vacations and all this stuff, but it took a few months. And finally, he convinced her to, even though I didn't match what they were looking for, he convinced her to give me a pre-approved loan. So I get this pre-approved loan, and it was enough to buy one house.
Hmm.
So,
Do you remember what you were pre-approved for?
like, I think it was like almost $70,000.
Okay. And where in the US are you buying the property?
So this is in the Triangle area in North Carolina.
Okay.
So and well, there was this area where you could see the way Raleigh was growing. There's only so many ways you can grow the city, right? And so you could see that some of these areas that are more sought after, they are up and coming neighborhoods. So you can see that people are starting to buy these smaller, old school homes and either tearing them down or giving them major remodeling, and so increasing the value. And the lots are nice and big, and then you're only 10 minutes from downtown Raleigh area. So there were a lot of things about these little smaller neighborhoods that was very appealing, but the property values at that time were very low. Like, so the first house we put a bid on. There were two of us. There were cash offers, and they ultimately gave it to me because she pitched my story of, look, she's a single mom, she's got two kids, she's just trying to do better. And ultimately, the woman that owned the property, no, the woman passed away. The son that owned the property ultimately gave it to me. I think I probably was similar to his mother's story, and it resonated with him. And so he ended up accepting my offer. So I was able to go right away, write a check off of my home equity line of credit for cash buying the house, because I also did that when I downsized. I made sure to open a home equity line of credit while they all had my paperwork, and it was a much easier process. So I did that. And then the house was mine because it's a lot smaller paperwork when you buy cash. And then I went back to the bank and I said, here's my pre-approval letter. And they opened up a loan for 80% of the purchase price. And then I took the check and then paid off most of the home equity line of credit. And then little by little, I chipped away at that. And I had to wait until the next year before I could buy another property. So then I could show there's income coming on this one property.
Yep.
And they increased my pre-approval amount so that I was able to buy two properties the next year. And so I bought two more.
Okay,
And
you're burying the lead here. How many properties?
oh, oh yeah, sorry. So I ended up,
Oh, it's all good.
yeah.
It's
So I mean, like
amazing.
in the book, it tells you like the whole story, but ultimately I ended up buying five properties in
Wow,
3 years.
that is great. That is amazing. Do you still own them today?
I still own them today.
Wow. So just out of curiosity, that original first home that you bought,
Yeah,
what's the market value of that today?
it's
You
like
know,
230,000
that's a pretty
as is.
that's a pretty
Yeah.
good return.
Yeah, it is, because it's not like I haven't added a floor or a whole room, or it's just the house, and then I just did some upgrades with the kitchen and the bath, like your key places. And yeah, and so those homes are all, I bought them anywhere between like 60 and 80,000 each. And then they're probably all somewhere between 230 and 270 each.
That is so great.
Yeah,
Good for
yeah.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's just, it's a lot of homework, and, understanding the market, and listening to people and reading and researching. And yeah, I mean, like there were things that I didn't factor in, like the repairs for some of these properties were extensive, but I still was able to buy all five, and they were all different circumstances. So it's kind of makes for a fun story. Each one of them has its own little story behind it. But yeah, I mean, like I talk about the interest rates and all of that stuff, and I actually back then, I was able to do a consolidated loan, and so I took all of my little baby loans
Yeah.
and turned it into a consolidated one. And right off the bat, I was saving thousands of dollars just by doing that one thing. And and now I own them free and clear with a small mortgage on one property. And because it keeps going, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's one thing that I did too with my commercial lender. I took five residential mortgages, rolled them
Mhm.
into a portfolio loan, or like what you said, a consolidated loan, and right away you start to save so much money, you know?
My goodness, yeah.
Yeah.
And at a smaller interest rate too.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that one when I first got it, it was like 4%, which is
That's
great,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's what I have.
Unfortunately, a couple of those that I have now, because those commercial loans, they reset every 5 years. So I had a couple of them that reset from like four to like seven and a half. It's like, damn it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got mine were 15-year with a 7-year term. And so the first time I reset it, they did a change in terms,
Hmm,
right? So we did a change in terms, which meant that I get to keep the 4% and I get to extend my 7 years out further. So I've
gotcha.
got two more years before there's a balloon payment. So I don't know. We'll see what the interest rates are then.
Yeah,
But certainly, I think the best I can do now is 6%.
right,
So
right. That's what we just locked in at our commercial new construction that we're doing. We locked in at six. So
there you
um
go.
I
Yeah.
know
I mean,
you
that's better than 7.5 for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. I mean you and I could probably talk about real estate the entire show, but I know that there are
Hmm.
a lot of listeners that give a rat's ass about about real
Yeah.
estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, but I'm excited because again, your story it's so inspiring that people, when they're getting the gut punch of some sort of setback, you're
Yeah.
proof that you can, rise above and you can overcome those setbacks. So your book, Grab Your Slice of Financial Independence, that came out in I think 2022, right?
September. Yep.
Okay. So you had I mean, obviously you didn't need to write a book, but I'm curious where did that say, you know what? I want to share this story. I want to write a book. You had
Yeah.
already reached FI at the time, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So what was that like to all of a sudden say, okay, I'm going to write a book. I want to share this story. What was that like?
So truly, it did not happen like that. I can tell you, because I reached FI, and then it was, they do the 1 more year syndrome, and so my 1 more year syndrome, I think, lasted like 4 years. I think I was 4 years of 1 more year, and so I went to a FinCon, my very first FinCon.
Hmm.
Okay, and I was what I refer to myself as a groupie because I didn't have social media, I didn't have a website, I didn't have any of that stuff. I just wanted to go and meet some of the people that I read their books, their
Yeah.
blogs, watch their videos, and just meet some people. And so as I was meeting people, they would ask me, like, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm just a groupie. I said, but, I tell them my story and they're like, you should write a book. And like, really, like 8 out of 10 people, they're like, you should absolutely write a book
Wow.
because, you talk about your health, you talk about the kids, you talk about the money, but like, there's all these components to it. There are
Hmm.
lots of people who would resonate. And my answer was always like, I just kind of shrug it off and I just like, you're just being polite and that's really thoughtful. But I mean, who wants to hear the story of a single mom who's struggling? But as it turns out, there are 12 million single moms here in the United States, more or less,
Yeah.
and about 3 or 4 million single dads. So clearly there's an audience for this. And so then I thought, well, gee, what am I going to say? It wouldn't fit a pamphlet. And so I thought, I'll just give it a shot and just see what comes up. And then, because I'm a goal setter and I journal and I keep a lot of records. I started putting it together and I'm like, oh, I want to write about this, or oh, I want to talk a little bit about this. And it turned into 200 pages before I knew it. And so that's more how it came out. I think the next question for me was because in the book, what makes it different, aside from telling my story, is that I made the decision to publish my net worth at the end of each year.
Hmm.
And I felt like to tell the story is one thing, and that's powerful, but I think it really drives it home when you can see how, like what J Money did, you can see how the money moves up,
Hmm.
down, because a lot of times people think, oh, you're going to, this is what I thought when I graduated college. I'm like, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get promotions. It's going to look like this, it's going to go
Right.
straight up. But in fact, it's
Right.
like mountains, you're up and down. It's like
Yeah.
a roller coaster. You got some corkscrews in there, and And so showing people that that is normal, it kind of tied the whole story together, and then one thing that's not in the book that I will say here with you
Hmm.
and your listeners is that one of the things that happened in the book during those early years when I was unemployed was I had to borrow money from my mom, who was on fixed income, and she would lend me money. I would say lend because I had intentions to pay her back. And then, when I finally had a job and I had the money to pay her, but she got really cranky at me and said that, that's ridiculous and never bring it up again. But I put it in my kids' 529s so that, because it's pride, right? And
Hmm.
so one of the things I had to learn those first 5 years was you have to swallow your pride. You have to do what you have to do and, swallow your pride and do what you got to do. So, um, it's just yeah, so that's where the book came from, really, and just encouragement from a lot of the people in the fire community. And yeah, so that is how it came about.
Right on. I love that. And I think, and then leading, I guess I shouldn't say that. Following the book, I know you now have a coaching practice, right?
I
Where
do.
you're coaching divorced and single parents. Um, I'm assuming that it kind of is personal to you. Like you're doing that because it kind of is a structure around your own story. I guess for those people that are listening, like talk a little bit about why you wanted to get into coaching others, and then talk a little bit about what you do to help them overcome those setbacks.
Yeah, yeah. So what I learned from my own journey is that, there are DIYers who will read the book, do the exercises, take advantage of all the free tools on the website, and that is enough for them because they can motivate themselves and will it to happen. But what I learned is that some people they need a little hand holding in the beginning. They don't know where to start. They don't know. They're not going to spend the time doing all the homework and research, and so hiring a coach to help them through that process and avoiding all the pitfalls and all the mistakes and setbacks and just streamline it makes it so much easier. So some people really gravitate to that because they just want someone to tell them, okay, how do I get this going? Where do I start? And then build a plan. And so one of the things I know about myself is that I'm not a hand holding kind of person. So the program that I built is only a 4 month program. Because to me, I figure any of us, we can do anything for 4 months and focus. So I have a 4 month
Well,
signature.
let me pause there. You can do things for fun.
Yeah, that's what I tell myself
I know
if it's
that's
hard.
great. That's great. No, I like that. I like that.
But yeah, so because my claim to fame is that I want my clients to be able to build that foundation and build those muscles so that I'm worked out of a job. And that's truly what I want. And now I have accountability because, everybody's circumstance is different. So
Sure.
the way I build my 4 month program, it's very flexible. I charge one time a month for 4 months. So every month, but you can meet as many or as few times as you need it to be. So some people, they're
Okay.
good with once a month. Other people, twice a month. Some people, they have some messages in between, but because everybody's circumstance is different, everybody's journey is different. And so the way I built this program, it's because I believe in every single client that I get. And I genuinely want to see them successful. And so I build the program to be as flexible so that they can make it what they need it to be. And at the end of the 4 months, then we have a conversation of, do we want to do accountability? And I'll tell them straight. A lot of times they say, I don't think you need it. I think you've got this. I mean, I'm always here and, we can meet down the road. But then I have other clients who they will set up a time 2 months out because they want to
Mhm.
try and do it by themselves. And then if something happens, they know that they have already a meeting on the calendar to come
Right.
back to.
Right.
And that, so that I feel like is, because I'm a tough love, like I'm going to help you get you kicked out of the nest, but I'm
Sure.
not the type of coach that's going to hold on to you for a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
Some people need that, and there are some fabulous coaches who have a whole year program. And I think for people who need that, I think that's fantastic. But so I know I'm not a fit for everybody, but we do a lot of front loading. It's just like in the fire community. If you invest early in your life, the earlier, the better.
Mm,
That's kind of how this program, I'm front loading it in a time when you need it the most
right.
so that you build and move on from there and work with a financial advisor or CPA or, however you want to go.
Right. Well, but let me ask you this. So, I mean, I mean, it's hard. Like I joked about being able to keep with something for 4 months and, but we know that there are people who don't follow through or
Right.
don't take it seriously. Are there times when you just had to like, sometimes you have to fire your customers or you had to like fire your clients? Like, you know what? This isn't a good fit. Has that ever happened?
Yes. Last year was the first time. And my gut said this is not a fit for you.
Really?
Yeah, my gut already told me they need somebody else, that you are not going to be,
Mm,
this 4 month program is not going to be enough. This is not your client. But I took them anyway because they were so insistent. They know, like, and they trust me. And that goes a long way, especially when you're talking about money. So against my better judgment, I took them on and they did not follow through. They were ghosting my emails. I spent way more time than I should have. And that was a learning experience for me too. But I ended up ultimately firing them, and because it's not a fit. And I'm happy to, show them. I have a lot of coaching friends that, I'll refer to other people, because, like, I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But for those that are like, it's more like a boot camp, 4 months where you're going to make some changes and learn something about yourself and your relationship to money and how you grew up and what you really want. What does really financial independence mean to you? What is your joy today? What are those little things that happen on the daily that make you smile and make you feel like, and a lot of times my clients, it's really comes down to they love hearing their family laugh. Laughter is a wonderful thing. Those, building those relationships, seeing their kids grow, just being healthy themselves. These are things that don't necessarily cost money, but they are the things that bring you joy. And so my goal is to teach them in those 4 months is we are aligning your spending so that it matches what makes you happy today, but without sacrificing tomorrow's security. And the definitions of that in the beginning is the foundation that we work on to build that cash flow and clean it all up before we even get to creating a budget. And how do we use this budgeting tool to be flexible to support the lifestyle that you want as you go through life and get married and have kids and all of those things,
right,
so
right. Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that, there are those times too where, we talked about your story and um there are going to be those people that say, yeah, but my situation's different,
yeah.
right? Or, they have, I guess, what do you tell them or how do you kind of um help them start their journey? Like what is that first couple things you talk about? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, anybody can come and talk to me for 30 minutes. It's like a free consult that I do.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, so we start there and they tell me, what prompted them to call and what are they looking to get out of this? What are their pain points? And then I tell them about, how I can help them. Sometimes they'll say, I can give you some options, like I have a financial therapist that I can refer you if it's more on the emotional side and a bit more than what I feel like I can do with my 4 month program. Or if they feel like they need a 12-month program, I have coaches that, work with military people, active. And so I'm not a military person. So I'll refer out. I mean, like to me, the 30 minutes you never lose with me because somewhere you're going to find what your next step is, what is possible for you.
Sure.
And then if they decide to come with me, then, we flush out a little bit more. And it's just the first time, it's really just a lot of, an hour and a half of just talking about, and I have like these list of 7 questions that I like to ask. And it goes anywhere from, thinking about growing up and, how your parents handled money. What did you see? Did you feel like you were ever going without?
Mm.
Because a lot of that shows up in our adult life,
Yeah.
you know. And so we start with that and what brings them joy and what are their priorities and what is their definition of financial independence? What is their definition of retirement? a lot of times we don't really think about those things. And I encourage them to say that these are questions that is ongoing, to
Mhm.
long after I'm gone, think about these things every, 6 months, year. Is that the same definition? Like my definition of financial independence when I started is very different from then to now because my circumstances are different. Like back then, it was all about kids and what they needed. They were in elementary school and building security for them. But now they're young adults, and so financial independence is traveling for me and going to these conferences and building this business and helping people and paying it forward, and
Yeah.
that brings me joy. And
That's
so thinking about those things, and even retirement. I mean, a lot of people don't. They're like, well, I just want to. I had one client when I asked her that question. She goes, well, I want to retire. My mid 60s, and I said, okay. And so, what would you be doing?
right. What does that look like?
Yeah, what does that
I
look
don't
like?
know.
Yeah, and that was it. And she's like, I don't know. I go, well, do you want to travel? Yes. Okay. What kind of travel are we talking about? And
Yeah.
and really drilling into, are we, selling everything and moving into an RV and going around the United States? Are we living on a cruise ship? Are we home and babysitting the grandchildren?
Right.
What does retirement look like? Are you working? Are you working part-time? Are you volunteering? I mean, so many things. And it's not a one-time conversation.
Right.
It's something that it's an evolving, just like your budget, it's evolving with you. And so that's the kind of stuff that I teach my clients so that they come with confidence. And then when they get to working with a financial advisor or whomever, it's so much more robust. They have answers to these things. They know generally how much they're spending every month today.
Hmm.
They know what they want their retirement to look like, and they can extrapolate what that's going to look like with their financial advisor, and how do we get there with investments and stuff that I do not do. I don't do any investments.
Sure. I think you hit something that is very important is that sometimes we don't look at, well, what does that retirement life look like? And again,
Yeah.
I've said this before, probably multiple times on the podcast too, because a lot of times I'm talking to someone that, they may be working towards retiring early and we talk about the fire lifestyle with reaching financial independence with the option to retire early. And you mentioned like J Money, like one of the OGs, this was back. Let's just go back 15 years or so. Let's, you know, I think that there was this fire movement where everyone would, let's just scorch to earth, rice and beans, sprint to a fine number,
Yeah.
and then what? Like there was
Right.
really no discussion about, well, what truly is, what does
Yeah.
retirement life look like? So I think that's really important. Well, so let me ask you this then. So you now, right? You retired from corporate, you're
Hmm.
doing work that you care about, right? Now you're an author, a coach, and I guess for someone that is is now in the situation you were in and they
Hmm.
can't even imagine like
Right.
what a version of their life would be like, what is something that you can tell them to kind of keep them going?
Yeah. So I would say that it is a point in time,
Mm,
and that tomorrow can be different. And that the good news is that you have the power to make it different. You have the power to change what your future looks like. That right now doesn't dictate your tomorrow.
right.
And understanding that and truly feeling that, and having a friend to talk to. Because I think, like, for me, when I was in the thick of it and I was unemployed with all that debt and two kids to care for with no family here because my mom was down in Florida, it is really hard to see the forest through the trees. It's just, you just don't even know where you're going. You don't even know if the direction you're going is going off a cliff, or if you're going to be coming to a clearing and you can finally feel some sunlight.
Yeah.
And having a friend that you can talk to, cry on their shoulder.
Who is that
Uh,
friend for you? Just give them a shout.
this, yeah. Oh, my friend Liana, friend from college, and she was absolutely that cry on her shoulder kind of person. And I would even say to her, I just sometimes I feel like you're in the helicopter with the big flashlight, and you're like, hey, just keep going this way, and you're flashing the light on me, and it's like, sometimes it's just so dark down here that, just having that just feels right. And so, and that's something that, sometimes, I mean, I've had a couple of doctors that I've coached, and sometimes people are really surprised to hear that. Oh my God, they're doctors, they make big money. Well, yeah, they make big money, but just because you're a good doctor doesn't mean that you know how to manage your finances.
Right.
Last
Yeah.
year, I had a person who works in finance. She
Wow.
she it works in finance and manages like 30 people,
Oh,
all finance, and she did not have a budget. She thought she did. So, my thing is that, just because you're making good money or you even work in the industry doesn't mean that your house is in order,
right.
because it's very different when you're at work doing work stuff versus going home,
Right.
and so for some of my clients who are going through a divorce or on the other end, they don't have anyone to talk to. There's no one there they don't have a Liana that
Yeah.
understands and is there for them. And so sometimes I provide that, where they can just do that, cry on my shoulder and vent or whatever it is they need to do,
Sure.
and we build that into, that's just sometimes it, because I know how important that is to
Yeah.
have someone
Totally.
that understands.
Yeah. And a shout out to my buddy Scott. Um, he was there for me going through divorce, going through all the things. Um, you know, he was my shoulder to cry on, someone I could vent to, like all the things. So
Yeah,
shout out to Scott. If you listen, you know who you are. I wanted to, it's funny you mentioned how sometimes like they don't even have their own house in order, some of those professionals, right? It was so
yeah,
funny. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago and we were all sitting around and we were talking about all at lunch and we're talking about the differences in like financial advisors and are they commissioned insurance salesman versus a fiduciary, flat fee advisor, like that type of thing. And I remember someone said when they talked with someone that was trying to sell them on, some funds and stuff, he pulled up his app, his phone. He's like, "Yeah, this is what we use." And literally his credit score was like 580 on his, on it.
wow,
Like this is someone that's doing the thing and it was like, "Wow, like you are." Anyway,
yeah,
that was crazy. So they
yeah,
knew right away, well, why would I take your advice?
right, yeah,
You literally
exactly.
can't even pay your own bills. So you know what? We're close to wrapping up here. And Monica, this has been absolutely awesome. One question I like to ask is like, what is like the biggest money myth today that you want to kill, or you think that it's just people shouldn't be following this money myth? What do you think that is?
I think that one of the things that strikes me is that a lot of times when people come to me, they're, and we have our 30-minute, one of the things they'll say is, oh, if I just made more money,
Yeah, right.
everything, yeah, if I just need to find a job that makes more money and it'll all be fine. And
It's always
that
the
is
case. Yeah.
yeah. Now, maybe for some people out there, maybe that is true, but I will say that if you don't know how to manage the money in your hand, then it will never be enough money. It will never be enough money, because it's like you see, these sports people that come from poverty and then now suddenly they've got millions, and then it's all gone.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter in a lot of ways how much you make, because whether you're making 50,000 or 500,000, if you spend it all, you still have zero. So that's the one I would pick.
I love that. Yeah, it's so true. So true. That's great. Well, Monica, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This was super fun. I want you to share again, where can people find more about you, where they can grab their own slice? Like,
Yeah.
where would you tell them to go?
Yeah, so my website is grabyourslice.com. You can even email me, Monica at grabyourslice.com. My book is Grab Your Slice of Financial Independence. And you can find that on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. There are a lot of reviews on, like several, like Goodreads and whatnot. So you can see the reviews there. But yeah, so those are the ways you can get a hold of me. If you go to the website and the contact me page, you can book the 30 minutes.
Great.
Um, my calendar right away. And yeah, I'd love to hear from people and, help
Perfect.
anyone I can. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Monica. And for those of you that are like driving or at the gym, I'll put all the links in the show notes so you can just tap it and go book your time or get the book. So thank you everyone. Again, thank you, Monica. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for following along. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And we'll see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show.